If I were funding my game today, I wouldn't go with a publisher. I was offered 2 publisher deals worth around 300,000. Both collapsed, one after months of work. I learned the lesson the hard way. After working 13 years in games, I stopped assuming publishers were the right path for indie developers. I'll explain why publishers aren't always the right choice and how I found a funding path where you don't need a pitch tour, a publisher, or even more than a prototype. At some point, most developers hit the same wall. They need funding to finish their game. I've done the publisher pitch circuit. You spend a week pitching non-stop, come home exhausted, and most say no. To put the odds into perspective, some publishers have shared their numbers publicly. In a typical year, they look at over 2,000 projects. Around 30 get a serious internal review, 2 games get signed. If your game doesn't get a publisher, it's usually not because the game is bad. The competition is just extreme. To even be considered, you usually need a strong pitch deck, a trailer, a polished demo, and some form of traction. If you are among the few who get funded, publishers often take 100% of the revenue until they recoup, including internal marketing costs. Then 15% after that, plus the rights on the sequel. Some publishers also ask for IP ownership or creative control. It's less common today, but when it happens, it changes everything. If the game succeeds, they own the sequels, the merch, and the long-term upside, even though you built the original game. And if the project stalls, you often can't easily take the game elsewhere. For some teams, this can still make sense, but financially it only works if the game significantly overperforms. Even after a deal is signed, things can fall apart. On one project, we had a publisher agreement in place. Milestones were approved, work was ongoing, and then the publisher pulled out. Funding stopped immediately. Contractually, we could have taken the game elsewhere, but by that point, months of development had been built around their budget, timelines, and expectations. Instead of restarting negotiations from scratch, we chose to finish the game ourselves and publish it independently. That decision came at real costs, financial pressure, delays, and personal strain, but it also shows how fragile publisher-dependent funding can be once it disappears. In another case, a publisher offered funding only if the crowdfunding campaign hit 75,000. We didn't reach that goal. For the publisher, it was a zero-risk setup. If the campaign proved demand, they stepped in and took a large share. If it didn't, they lost nothing. Publishers often bundle things like QA, playtesting, localization, and ports. But in practice, that's still funding, just outsourced and recouped later. If all you're getting is money and you're giving up control and upside, it's rarely a good trade. To be clear, publishers can still make sense in some situations. If you already have strong traction and clear market fit and you need to scale, marketing, de-risk, ports, platform access, a good publisher can accelerate what's already working. They can also make sense if you're willing to trade ownership for speed and when you're going in with full awareness of the cost. The problem is when publishers are treated as the default starting point instead of a deliberate choice. If you are at a crossroad with your game and want a second opinion, I do one-on-one calls. It's just a grounded conversation about your options, funding, publishers, or what to focus on next. There's also the option a lot of developers already know: self-funding while doing freelancing or contract work. I've done that too. It works, but it becomes a trade-off. Progression is slow, focus is split, creative energy often goes to client work instead of your own game. You stay in control, but you pay for it with time and momentum. For some people, that's the right choice, but it's not scalable and it's easy to burn out when the game only exists in the margins of your week. That's why I started looking for funding models that don't require giving up control, but also don't require sacrificing years of your life to client work. What works better for smaller teams isn't traditional publishers. It's funding models where risk, upside, and control are aligned. The key difference is structure. Instead of a recoup phase where all revenue flows one way, investors share risk and upside from day one. You keep creative control, there's no revenue blockout period, and incentives stay aligned through the release. One example of this model is Blue Ocean Games. They take a minority ownership stake and a revenue share without an initial recoup phase. What makes approaches like this interesting is how early they engage. In some cases, you can apply with just a game concept and a short introduction. The focus is the idea and the developer, not how far along the project already is. They also experiment with early validation. Developers submit trailers, not finished games, and ideas are tested publicly. Even if you don't get funded, you walk away with real signal, feedback, and full control of your project. That's why I'm pursuing this route now. It's the closest I've seen to funding that actually matches how small independent teams work. Publishers aren't evil. For the right team at the right time, they can still make sense. But for small and solo developers, the default assumption that publishers equals best path is outdated. You have more options now. Self-funding if you're willing to trade speed for control. Early investment if you want aligned incentives. Or publishers, but only when you fully understand the cost. The mistake isn't working with a publisher. The mistake is the wrong deal costing your time and maybe even your project. Funding choices don't just affect your game. They affect how you work, how long you can sustain yourself, and whether going full-time is even realistic. In another video, I break down exactly how I approach going full-time as a game developer. What worked, what didn't, and the trade-off I had to accept. If you're trying to figure out when or if full-time game dev makes sense for you, that video picks up where this one ends. If this video helped even one developer avoid a mistake, it was worth making.